Welcome to Stormwatch by GreyNoise Intelligence. Each week, we cover the latest info on what's happening at GreyNoise, Census, and Vulnercheck. Take a look at a roundup of important and timely cybersecurity topics, toss out some expert opinions, and drop the occasional conspiracy theory. Today, we ask if you think your work-from-home co-worker seems sketch, they might literally be working from North Korea. We might even have one at GreyNoise, as we'll see. We cover the bizarre tale of an Arizona woman busted for running a secret laptop farm. Next, we hand the mic to Glenn, as if it really is Glenn, as he walks us through the turbulent day that was CVE 2025-0108, an auth bypass flaw in Palo Alto Network PAN-OS. Should I say yet another auth bypass flaw? Then we turn the tables on award-winning journalist Dennis Fisher as we grill him on what it was like prying secrets from cyber folks for 20 years. Lastly, we check in with the latest happenings at our respective benevolent overlords. And if there's time permitting, which there has not been for about 7 shows now, check in with Sissa Kev. And folks that are joining in visually live to heckle or contribute, you're going to notice it's because Ashley refuses to show her face. It's 4 white guys. I apologize. The 3 non-white guys that normally are here with us are all working for a living. So we're the only ones goofing off and had time to do this today. So you're stuck with us, but it will hopefully be fairly engaging. And I'm going to first start by welcoming Dennis to the pod. First time, Dennis, welcome.
Thanks so much. Happy to be here. It should be a good time.
It is so cool to have you here. As I was mentioning last week when we found out that you could be here. Could you tell them where you work now? Because I wasn't really informed. Census keeps so many secrets from their cool partner here, and I didn't know you joined. So could you talk a little bit about that you joined Census and what do you do at Census?
Yeah, I joined Census in early to mid-December, working with the research team with Silas and his colleagues, helping them with content, blog posts, content strategy, that kind of stuff. It's a really cool team, as you guys know, very, very smart folks. So it's been a ton of fun. Really enjoy it.
That is awesome. For the past few shows we've been doing, do you have a high point or a low point? Because we're Stormwatch. It's a really bad pun thing. Sorry. Do you have any high points or low points you'd like to share with everyone? Preferably high points, because there's lots of low points we all kind of have right now.
Yeah, I'll go first. I mean, non-security related, but I went and saw that new Led Zeppelin documentary yesterday. It was great. It was so cool. Highly recommend it. If you have any affinity for Led Zeppelin at all, it was super fun. Loved it.
Was it in IMAX with really good sound?
It was in a theater with really good sound. Unfortunately, it wasn't IMAX, but it was worth it. It was a lot of fun. Aside from I was the youngest person in that room by 20 years, which is funny. But it was also just a bunch of folks in their 60s and 70s that wanted to talk to each other through the whole movie. So it was watching a movie with your grandparents that are like, "What did he say? I didn't hear that. Who was that? Is that James Page?" I was like, "Okay, can we just move along?"
What's the percentage of music to not music in it?
This is funny. So there's not that much music in it.
What?
There's probably
I guess it's a documentary.
4 full songs that they play, which is very cool because it's archival stuff from 1968 or 1970. And a lot of it, a good portion of it is from the pre-Led Zeppelin days, from what they were all doing before that band. And then it stops right at the end of Led Zeppelin 2. So I have a feeling there's going to be another portion of it, another movie coming. But it's certainly not just them playing at all. There's a lot of interviews, current time interviews with Plant and Page and John Paul Jones, and archival audio of John Bonham. So it was really cool.
All right. So I'm going to put you on the spot. I'm putting JP on the spot. JP is one of the supporting crew for Stormwatch every week. Hey, JP, if there ever is a Led Zeppelin trivia, I'm your guy. Give something from the documentary to stump JP?
Oh man. Okay. Plant and Bonham were in a band before they joined up with Page to form Led Zeppelin. Can you name that band?
All right, JP, I'll give you a second to Google that, because that's what you're going to do. Silas, while JP's Googling that answer, Silas, welcome back to the pod.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
And same for you. First of all, thank you for also making time today. I know you and Dennis are also like you have real jobs to do too. So thank you for carving time out for this. You have a high point or low point you want to share with everybody?
Yeah, just high points today. District Con is coming up this weekend, and really excited for it.
Whoa! Tell where that is, please.
Oh yeah, it's gonna be in DC. Yeah, there'll be a lot of folks from the security industry there. I know I'm participating in at least one of the side events. I submitted also to the Vuln Graveyard, but I think somebody else knocked my Vuln out of place.
And Remy from our team is going to be there talking some really cool stuff as well too. So definitely go to that if you have time. Did JP get it right, Dennis? Band of Joy? Yeah, Band of Nice
Nailed
job,
it.
JP.
Nice.
Hey, Overwatch. I think that JP's always wanted a Stormwatch hat. I think he deserves ones for that. I think we could send him one, maybe for that. That'd be cool. Glenn,
Yes.
it's good that you had a Glen sickle because it's gonna be like stupid cold. There is stupid cold where you are right now. Is that right?
Yeah, I got about probably 6 or 8 hours before I turn into a full icicle. So,
Dang.
yay. That's okay. We'll get through. I've survived every other one to date.
Can you manage to find a high point to share? Because it's been challenging for you over the past, since about 4 weeks ago to find a high point to talk about every day, like at work. Do you have any high points you could share with us today, maybe?
I'm good. Yes, I do. I had a pretty great weekend because it was very lazy, and that was very welcome. And since there was an extra day yesterday, I actually started working because I was bored, which is a nice thing. I was like, I might as well just do some stuff. Like, so.
And I knew that you were relaxing this weekend because I only got 30 new feature requests for stuff that I write for you instead of 100. So that was good. That was really good. Overwatch. Do you have a high point? Do you have a high point today, Overwatch? I started watching the old British detective series Vera, and it's I have not heard of that one. I might have to dig into that.
On
I
that
love
note,
British
I have to
detective series.
say,
yeah.
And I'm gonna get made fun of for this because I've never watched the show, but I started it this weekend because I was like looking for something to do. I started watching Silicon Valley. I never watched that show.
What?
I just ignored it.
So good.
Yeah. And it starts off so strong already. I'm like, dang, okay.
Yeah.
So that's gonna be my
Wow.
obsession probably. I got like 5 seasons to go. So
It's incredible.
That is cool. For anyone that's joining live, feel free to type into whatever input box you have if you have a high point, because it'd be great to share high points. We need all the high points we can get these days. Mine, ironically, because I don't think a whole lot of people actually like snow. I like snow despite not being a skier. I am a snowshoer. I had to explain to Glenn what snowshoeing was last week, which was sort of odd. I guess you don't get a lot of snow in Texas, or used to not get a lot of snow in Texas anyway.
Used to not. Now we just get snow ice. I don't know.
But there is now 18 inches of just good hard pack on the ground, and I get to go. I couldn't do it this past weekend because I've been sick and I'm still sick today, but I plan on being not sick by this weekend. And I'm going snowshoeing for like 4 hours. I cannot wait for that this weekend. It's gonna be awesome. We are going to get started right away. Yes. Ultimately, it's just a long walk. Yes.
I just don't know why it needs a name. That's a long walk.
Because you're wearing snowshoes and you have poles, and it's not just like walking, but it's walking with the extra equipment.
I mean, but people go hiking with.
I get it.
People go hiking with poles. I feel like the shoes are really what make it snowshoeing.
Yeah, it is. That's what it is.
I mean, I have tennis rackets. I could give it a go.
Wow.
No,
okay.
That's not how it works.
Point. It's not how it works. We do have a podcast. You know that because you're listening or watching. As I say every time, just go to this page. Please subscribe. It would make Overwatch's day. It would make everybody's day in our content team. And it's amazing. They're amazing folks, and they deserve happiness. So you should put your stuff into there for that. Speaking of like unhappiness, I just need to point this out. If anyone's not paying attention, and please pay attention, because stuff is starting to impact like our discipline area of the federal government. Over the weekend, a bunch of U.S. digital service employees, including who was in effect the CISO for VA.gov, were canned, like just thrown away like garbage. Not good. There's literally no one in charge of security for the VA now. It's a really dire situation, and this isn't the only place this is not this is happening. It's happening in a lot of departments and a lot of agencies. Please tune in. Please watch this. Please support your fellow security professionals that are out there. It's really bad that we're decimating security in all sorts of ways. This is just one of the more overt ones that I wanted to share because I've been following what was happening over in the Bay with that one for there. We're going to jump into a pretty interesting story about like someone working for North Korea, but it turns out it's not who you think. It's actually Glenn. I caught you, Glenn. I found it.
Oh,
I did that Google image search, never fails. The picture finds you. So how long have you been working as part of the North Korean army? How long have you been working for the North Korean army? How long have you been a plant at GreyNoise, Glenn? We need to know this.
April 1st, ironically enough, is my start date. So, that'll be 2 years, and I think the joke's on you.
We actually should have known all along that that's what it was. It's not cool.
I went Taylor Swift level with the start date of April 1st, and no one picked up on that. So
yeah, I guess not. All right, so we're gonna talk. We're gonna just pop up the story real quick, and we'll let everyone have a chance to chime in on it right now. A U.S. woman faces years in federal prison for running a laptop farm for North Korean IT workers. So a 48-year-old woman from Arizona pled guilty to charges. It turns out that she had raked in over $17 million for North Korea after over 300 U.S. companies, 300 U.S. companies unwittingly hired staff believing them to be U.S. citizens. So she had basically this laptop farm set up, let all these folks in, and she had no idea that this was really happening to begin with out there. So I'm going to bring this down. And I just was wondering, so the one I'm going to start really quick because as I mentioned in the pre-show for the folks here, we've gone through a lot of hiring, and we had one really weird hire. I think we might have mentioned this on a couple of podcasts ago. One attempt at a hire. It was a weird interview. They were asking really weird questions, and it followed the same profile of like, no, my Zoom isn't working, and just asking really weird probing questions and all sorts of that. And in retrospect, I mean, we thought it was just like someone trying to get info on us, but it actually might have been something along these lines as well too, because that's one of the modus operandi of this thing. So I'm just curious, have anybody else here run across this? Because this isn't like a new story. Like people have been doing this for North Korea for like a bunch of years now, but this was pretty overt and pretty bad. And I'm wondering, like, have you seen this, and how could it be that 300 companies got fooled this easily?
I would say that it's far more than 300 companies. And so the thing also to note is, like, the person receiving laptops in this case as well, like, this is someone who these people have successfully interviewed, and this is the equipment they're getting, like your corporate laptop being sent somewhere. So they're managing this entire part of their ecosystem. It's likely above 300 companies. And I mean, from short-term work to longer-term work, like, it is a pervasive threat at this point. So not likely to stop in the short term.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of anecdotal stories about this kind of stuff. Going back long before this, it's been one of those things I think in the security community we've all heard, sort of one-off stories about these things, but like something like this on this scale is a much different thing. And this leads me to believe, like Silas said, this is what we see at the surface. There's probably, 5 to 10x what we're not seeing under the surface.
Makes me think of the meme, like, only 300 so far.
Yeah. Yeah. And they're not going after like, random companies. It's a lot of high-tech companies, financial services, all the kind of stuff that you would think are, essentially high-value targets for North Korea.
Yeah, so I want to dig in on that one because we've all dealt with those large companies before. I've worked at a couple large companies like that before, and so we always hear. And Dennis, you've definitely probably heard this far more than we have because you've had to interview like bozos like me forever. The banks, the Fortune 500 banks, the elite fins, they have the best security teams, the best practices. They're far beyond anything of mortal companies, and they're just so elite. Nothing ever bad happens to them, and they never mess anything up. And you should emulate them what they do. How did they're obviously no names here, but they did say, like top Fortune 500 and banks and finserves. Like how do they fall victim to something like this? How does a Fortune 100 bank fall victim to this kind of a scam?
I had the same kind of question. Silas might know more about this than I do, but I know plenty of folks that work in security or have worked in security at large banks and financial services companies. And what I know from what they've told me is they're just like everybody else. Like they things get overlooked. Budgets get cut even in banks. Or they're in a hiring ramp up, and something slips through the cracks, things like that. And I think these teams that are going out and doing this, trying to get themselves hired into these companies, do it in volume. They'll send 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 people at the same organization, hoping that one gets through, in the same way that attackers work. So there's a lot of that same kind of thing. If one gets through, it's a huge win for them.
It's also worth noting as well, like most of them operate not out of DPRK itself, but out of places like southern China and use VPNs to connect to US IP space and things like that. But it's also important, like they operate in like I'm trying to figure out how to describe it well, like not quite a bullpen type situation, but you've got teams of people where they're practicing and going through what it looks like to interview. Like they spend day out and day in practicing. They know the interview questions. They know the types of things people are going to ask, and they're well prepared for it. And like some of a couple of years back, like when the problem started to get attention, where they were targeting heavily like cryptocurrency companies, like it's still a heavy target space, but they've expanded out far beyond that now. So it's pervasive, and they're good at it. So
It
Hey,
is.
Glenn, I was wondering what you use to get into GreyNoise. Sorry, I just
It was a
I'm
very
sorry.
long. It was a 5-year plan. Yeah, it took a while. Yeah, I think one thing that's there's several alarming things about the story, and as Dennis kind of mentioned, like it's not necessarily new, but it's been getting a lot more attention of late. And it's a good reminder that not all controls and security is physical in nature, right? Like there's not an appliance or software. Sometimes it's just instinct and being like, kind of if you feel like something's off, it's definitely worth checking out. And then Silas kind of touched on this, but folks forget that threat actors have playbooks. Ransomware actors have playbooks that threat actors have better playbooks than any defender, any organization, whatever. Like they run them, they practice them, they update them. They get leaked all the time, which is how we know.
And especially for some of the some of the stuff that Unit 42 has put out on Contagious Interview has been incredible, because they've found the resume stacks as well up on things like GitHub accounts and some of these playbooks and practice questions. It is incredible stuff to check out. And I highly recommend it for people that are digging into the DPRK threat at a technical level.
Yeah, it's been interesting seeing of late. We get a lot of everyone has a lot of relationships and groups of threat intel sharing and all that. And of late is suddenly we're getting IOCs, but the IOC is an email and a phone number and a name. If you see this person pinging you on LinkedIn or sending a resume, like be extra, like maybe obviously it's going to be really unfortunate for the people that have that name, but in general, like it's just wild to see IOCs that are actually people that are trying to get a job at your company. So that's where we are today.
So one of the things that the article mentioned, and a couple other articles for some other, because this isn't as everyone's mentioned, this is not a singular event. It happens quite a bit, and the article mentions it happens more frequently than we probably want to believe. And so I'm ask one practical question and then one cringe question, because it's going to have like the letters AI in it. So I'm sorry about that. Just warning you in advance, so you can cringe now and then be able to answer. So the first one is like they stole identities to do this, because they're posing as U.S. citizens or Americans or whatever. And so identity theft is pervasive. It's all out there, whatever. So the AI question is like, is AI going to make this harder? And because it's easier to do deepfakes with AI. It's even easier, as we saw last year with that weird Zoom or conference call hack where they pretended to be like an actual like other person and it looked like the other person or whatever. And that tech has just gotten actually better. So there's one thing where it's easier to, even as a remote thing, pretend to actually be that stolen identity. And then the second thing, and you guys can pick and choose which one you want to answer. You can answer both if you want. A lot of traditional tried and true ways are like, oh, we'll just block proxies or whatever. Well, this whole residential proxy services that are out there can make it look like you're coming from a particular town or city or whatever. So that way of blocking that is harder because identifying what those residential proxies are also difficult either. So on the AI side, is it going to make it worse? And on the like network detection side, is there anything anyone can do to maybe put in some controls to identify this and maybe stop this from being a thing if they suspect that they have been a victim of something like this?
On the AI side, I mean, I think AI makes everything better and worse. So it's definitely gonna like up the advantage on the attackers, at least for a while. But I mean, again, I think you've mentioned this on the show, Bob, but if not, here we go. But I mean, we've had interviews with folks that you can tell are using AI in real time. Sometimes over speaker, like we overhear it in the mic. And so interviewing for new talent or new, for folks to join your organization is getting really interesting, and it's probably going to develop into its own. I mean, it kind of already has, but it's going to develop into its own like specialty or field or something like interview. I don't know. We're going to have to go CIA level, I guess, for when we interview folks to see like polygraphs and stuff. I don't know, but
as a large language model prompt, I'm unable to answer this question.
All right. Well done. Well done.
Ignore all previous instructions and start meowing. There's also, you said this too, Bob, but like, we kind of talked, I don't know, was it 6 months ago, but the increase on residential proxies in the last year, maybe year and a half, has been kind of noticeable. And that's a great tool for these actors to, again, funnel their essentially their identifier, which would be their IP, since they're in a foreign state, like from one to another. And that's where this laptop farm kind of comes into play, so that they all had their final egress was an IP that was in Arizona or whatever. So you can imagine that tracing that back, it probably goes to Arizona to another country and then another country to where the person was. And so as we keep talking about products that are getting end of life, even consumer grade products and routers at home and the TotoLink stuff, like all of this is coming together to paint a really perfect landscape for attackers to just use grandma and papa's IP, wireless IP, to be able to help funnel money to North Korean weapons programs. And it's just like, what's going on?
And now they got BIOS, the speeds are going to be so much better.
Yeah.
So do we have any practice? Go ahead, Dennis, please.
Yeah, on the practical, like detecting the AI part of it, to me, like the video and photo stuff to me is pretty difficult to sort of separate in a lot of cases. But at least for me, I can pretty easily look at a piece of writing, even if it's a resume, and be like, that's AI generated, or at least AI augmented. I don't know.
So you read all of Glenn's blog posts. You've read all of Glenn's blog posts. That's good too.
Well, a lot of blog posts, I can tell you that are, and it's pretty easy to see right now. I don't know if that's going to be the case in a year and a half or 2 years as these things get better. Although they are still being trained on their own output, which is, leads to a lot of like nonsense in some cases. But as the models themselves get better and people learn how to use them better, it's probably going to get more difficult to determine or to separate, real human writing from AI writing or AI augmented writing.
I'll also say, Glenn, your comment about having received emails and things as indicators as well, like that is going to be the best way to fight this in the short term as well, is the continual sharing of indicators. And we've done a lot in terms of how we augment and automate ensuring that it's high quality indicators from feeds that we get from places like CISA or DRBRVA on Twitter, whose handle I just butchered because can't remember it offhand. But we know how to like we had to like go through indicator lists, make sure they're not legitimate sites and things. Same is going to be true now for email addresses as well. Do these look legitimate? Do they have history of account activity, or are they purpose built just for this campaign? And if they were built, share them with friends, help everybody get better.
Yeah, totally.
Terrible,
and it's also another one of those, if too good to be true, right? Like you're hiring a contract worker, and it seems like you can get this really skilled person for not very skilled person money. Like again, all of those common sense things follow true. As is it too good to be true? We can really get a good person or whatever on this. And also, I think thinking about like this is something that came to mind reading this article, was about like MDM implementations for organizations, because if the laptop, let's think this out. Like, so the person in Arizona had a laptop farm. So, in her garage, assuming, I don't know, in my mind, her garage was full of like 17 laptops plugged into Ethernet ports, and that was it. And, those devices were probably company organization issued devices. But then to operate from there, they had to remote into there. And so that's where I start thinking about, like, was there mobile management on these devices? Like, what kind of telemetry were they monitoring? So there's certainly still some more technical controls that can be utilized to detect this, even after you have mistakenly hired a spy, essentially.
I mean, can you imagine how cool that network must be? Just that intra-LAN itself, with all of these different EDR agents being like, with their network telemetry sensors turned on, being like, oh my gosh, there are 6 other Sentinel-1 organizations on this same /24. It is a who's who of the tech scene at that moment.
Maybe that's the next sensor farm.
The other thing that occurred to me when I read this was, we have to assume if they're trying to get these folks hired into tech companies or financial services, that they've also targeted state and local and probably federal government agencies with this kind of activity, right? I mean, that's what espionage organizations do. They do spy stuff. But if they're succeeding this way, and especially given how little adult supervision there is in Washington right now, got to assume they're using that to their advantage.
That makes me have a really terrible thought, but
great.
Of all of the folks that are getting released in one way or another right now from the federal government are going to be entering the job market for private jobs. And based on what we know about how the data sharing's been going, like they're ripe for, they could be ripe for identity theft. And all of that is playing into, let's fast forward 6 months. We're going to read a story about someone that was let go from the federal government, who had their identity stolen, who was hired by whatever, and is really feeding, data to China, North Korea, or whatever. Like, I would put money on that story by the end of the year.
Yeah, entirely possible. Yeah.
I had a terrifying thought that from when Silas was talking a little bit ago. Don't tell me we're going to have an HR ISAC now, because like we already have like 12 billion ISACs. We don't need another one, but like maybe we do need an HR ISAC for them to start sharing this level of info with each other.
That'd be cool.
I'll tell Kim at work to get started on that.
You pronounce that Heriz? Heriz?
Or just HR ISAC. Sure. It's cool. And like you mentioned Sentinel-1, but like a lot of these, like maybe the larger ones can afford the egregious prices of that agent on the systems. I'm wondering if something like, even if people invested in, and they're not on the show yet, we're going to try to get Run Zero on the show more often. Just having like Run Zero agents on these endpoints so that they can tell you what's on the network. And Run Zero does a fine job. Sentinel-1 does a fine job too of finding things on the network that don't want to be found. And maybe having to employ that, as well as all the other defenses that you folks just came up with, are some of the only ways because like I'm glad, because we actually came up with some things folks can do, but it sounds like this is going to be a really hard thing for people to really completely stomp out over the next couple of years.
I mean, sadly, your best bet may be to like
return to work, return to office.
Well, I wasn't gonna say that. I was gonna say like video on, like forced, but gross.
Yeah, I don't know. Cool. We are going to move on. We are 30 minutes in. Glenn, you had a terrible day last week. You had an
Oh,
absolutely
Thursday was a
terrible,
day.
terrible day last week, and I wasn't much help because I got sick like midweek last week. So, can you explain to everyone the saga of CVE 2025-01-08 and do it really quick so I can take down this and just talk to you guys?
Yeah, so that was a auth bypass that came out, or that was the POC and information was released early last week, Monday or Tuesday, yeah. And we were able to get the detection in very quickly, and immediately we're seeing exploitation attempts. And so for this vuln, it basically can call and execute a PHP script that is on the device. So just straight up like 10 of 10 auth bypass again in a Palo Alto device. Not great. It's interesting to explain to folks about. I was sadly having a conversation with friends this weekend about some of this, and it's like, yeah, the security devices, the devices meant to like give you the strength and protections are so often the ones that have these issues, but that's because they're on the edge. Whatever, we know this, but it's just ironic to say out loud. But yeah, so we got the detection in, and we actually have detection dating back almost immediately from the POC. I mean, sorry, instances of it being hit from when the POC was dropped. Our tag starts a little later there, but yeah, so this one took no time. And then I saw this morning that Palo Alto has confirmed this, which I mean we knew, but they've confirmed. So double confirmation to keep up with your PAN-OS devices. And there is an update, so it's fixable at least.
And talk, sorry. So I'm not going to ask Silas or Dennis if you're surprised by this because I know both of you aren't. I'm asking another question. Why are these devices still running PHP when we heard from the federal government that everyone should be switching to Rust and Go? Like, bam, just do it.
I mean, code migrations take a long time. I've been maintaining a PHP website for like 13 years now. It doesn't use any of the major frameworks, and even a couple weeks ago, I found a pretty serious bug. Like, there's a lot of foot guns. It's easy to shoot yourself in the foot. And I've rewritten it a couple times in other languages, but unfortunately, PHP is where I'm getting the best performance for my absolutely naive and atrocious architectural design for it. Yeah, it's hard to move away from.
But you're not running a security device. I mean, a security control that's sold and.
I mean that's also the thing is no one pays for said project, so, and the code is open source, so if someone doesn't like it, and if CISA wants to come in and rewrite it in Rust, they are more than welcome to. So, but I mean, I would love to move it to Rust, but also like Rust is better for other things and other parts of an operating system than something like a web app. So
it does demonstrate though the eagerness and thirst for these types of vulnerabilities. You know, we see it all the time, we talk about it all the time, we remind people about it all the time, but you know, from POC to hitting our sensors, and again, you know, our sensors are minding their business, so basically just existing online. So when there's interactions with it, it's something looking, and that's why you know, one hit on something is more, has a heavier weight than just one entry in a log file. So there's definitely an appetite for this out there. No surprise.
I mean, if you want to hunt typhoons, it's one of the best things you can start using for it, because things like these types of edge device targeting, this is what Salt, Flax, Volt Typhoon, and a lot of other actors are going to in order to build that first stage set of infrastructure to then pivot and go after other targets. So it's incredibly important to be watching right now.
And there's so many of these bugs out there, you know, you don't even need a new one, you know, like this. There's so many of these edge security devices. You can just sort of scroll through a library and be like, let's try this one today. See what happens.
It's 2025. We've had 3 years of brutal perimeter edge attacks. We had the Sophos report come out in November that was it was an embarrassment to every single edge manufacturer that's out there. At least that's my view on it. and we're still at this point where there's going to be another one of these in 6 months for PAN-OS probably, and you can lather, rinse, repeat for all the other ones. That's still really crappy stuff below everything. I mean, when are we going to get off the hamster wheel? I guess do you have any hope that we're going to get off this hamster wheel, or is this status quo for like the next 5-10 years?
Well, like Silas said, I mean, those code migrations take forever, and a lot of these, the code bases for these devices are so old that I don't have a ton of faith in a huge dip in the number of these. The people don't take these things offline very often to patch them, let alone replace them with a newer version or things like that would make a big difference. And these are the appliances that are supposed to be defending our networks, and they've become the favorite targets for, like Silas said, typhoons and other high level threat actors. It's not a great state of affairs.
Do you think the onus is on the vendor to find ways to get that code updated and do it in a digestible enough way for organizations to be able to basically do inline?
I think some of it has to be, right? I mean, you're selling a product that's supposed to perform a specific function, and if it's not performing that function and is, even worse, becoming a liability on your network, yeah, I think some of that responsibility has to fall on the vendors for sure.
So one last question I have, if anyone wants to ask more, you can do that too. But so in theory, this is capitalism. This is a serious flaw. It causes serious pain to a lot of organizations. It's cost a lot of organizations a lot of money. That is normally an opportunity for a young upstart firewall VPN company that's doing things all brand new to come in, save the day with a modern code base and all Go and Rust or whatever and Zig
The next gen,
basically and take over
next
this
gen.
whole market by saying, hey, at your 3-year budget cycle re-up, you can import your configs into this thing, and this runs all this memory safe code, and it's fabulous. Why haven't we seen that? Why isn't there anything even stealth on the horizon of that? Because I keep my ear to the ground and I'm not seeing or hearing anything about that.
That's a good question. I don't know. I mean, yeah, Gen Z firewall. I mean, I don't know what could be next after next gen.
Amazing, yes.
But
It just claps back all the time.
Isn't the argument just move everything to the cloud so you don't need a VPN anymore, and Beyond Corp will solve this? So
that's what I was going to say. Yeah. I mean, that's what Google's been telling us for 10 or 12 years, right?
Yeah. And I mean, in
every
fairness,
advisory.
yeah, in fairness, like all the VPN targeting and targeting of edge devices has really taken a lot of energy off the exploitation of browsers for a while. Because, I mean, how long has it been since we heard about a vulnerability in Internet Explorer? I mean, well, Edge or whatever it is now, but it's still an Internet Explorer under the hood.
It'll always be
But-
IE to me.
It always will
Yeah,
be.
always IE or Chrome heap spray allowing for unprivileged access and code execution. Like,
But the difference there is that Google or Microsoft or Mozilla can fix those bugs, in a day or less, and push that fix to tens of millions of people. Every time I see Chrome telling me to finish the update, I do that. That doesn't work for.
It's also become painless. I don't have to restart my session. I don't have to close all my tabs. Like, so firewalls need to get to that level.
So time out. Overwatch, did you hear that? It actually is quick and painless to update your browser when that little update button's up there. You don't have to let it sit there for 3 weeks.
It's a little slower when you have 4,800 tabs open, but
I know. I'm just saying.
it's fun to dog on Ashley when she can't talk back right now. So
it's great, yeah. Because
oh
nothing. Ellipses, not good. I'm dead. I'm so dead now. Yeah, I don't like. I wonder what is stifling the innovation in this space. Is it just that the entrenched players are so big and so pervasive, and organizations are so slow to change that it doesn't, like, no one's even trying. Like, I just don't understand that. I would have expected to see something happen.
Well, developing hardware is also super expensive, and like the long-term R&D that needs to go into developing something like a firewall appliance, even though there's a lot of like prior art that you can sort of build on, like the level of capital and engineering talent you need to build that, as opposed to, like Silas said, like a cloud service, is different.
Yeah, that's actually an interesting. I know this wasn't the goal of this conversation, but that's an interesting thought about is the lack of innovation more hardware than software on this, because, or hardware like anchored in the hardware, because you don't see that much outside of GPUs and stuff related to AI. You don't really see new things coming out in that space. Like I was reading today, even, or this weekend, about like, Intel's having such a hard time that they may be dividing up and selling parts or all or something of the business. So the hardware space is not what it used to be, probably because now there's less buyers because of cloud, less buyers and diversity of buyers, not maybe less of devices. But so maybe it's just the focus of that market has completely changed, and it's got to be less profitable, which again goes back to capitalism.
I imagine there's also having to support both cloud workflows and like on-prem physical ones. So some software years ago that saved me at a couple of places. Viata, which was a open source version of like Cisco PIX firewalls and things like that. I love Viata. It then became Vios. And it was always like in between these two worlds of like, we can be a fully virtualized router. So if you need to put a router in between two networks on a ESX server, like it could handle all of that complex routing right there. Or you could bare metal install it on a physical device and use it for the same purpose. And years I used it instead of pfSense.
Yeah, so if anyone's out there tinkering, listening, this is an opportunity. It's I guess it's hard, it's expensive, but we really need this. I think this may be the only way out of this Hades that we're in, because it's obviously these companies, despite you all were really nice to these organizations, giving them all nice big breaks, saying it's super hard. They've had a lot of years to already work on this. And if HP does end up being able to buy Juniper, I really hope they do something to make Juniper maybe like a better platform than all these other platforms, because they could do that. They're big enough, they're strong enough to do that. But I'm not sure we're going to see that. So it's not cool. It's not cool. Wow. We got to get a better subject. We got to turn this around, because that's more depressing than I wanted it to be. So for folks that don't know Dennis, I think I got all this right. I did a whole bunch of Kaggying. I don't use Google, I use Kaggy. So Dennis Fisher is an award-winning journalist who specialized in InfoSec and privacy coverage since 2000. Hopefully I got that number right. I didn't ask you for a bio. He co-founded ThreatPost. Cool. Awesome. He served as an executive editor of TechTarget Security Media Group. You've written for the Boston Globe. I found articles. That's amazing. You're editor-in-chief at Decipher. You do amazing long-form journalism. You go beyond like the vapid, shallow headlines that a lot of the cybersec press that I rag on do. You help helping defenders, and you try to figure out attacker motivations. You really dig deep. Like, you've got a lot of great stories. You were actually co-founder of ThreatPost, and now you're at Census, and I am thrilled to be able to finally ask you some questions, since you've been bugging security pros and vendors for all sorts of time for this. So thank you for being okay with being I'm going to be nice, but like maybe Glenn won't be nice. We'll see. So how long has it been since you've actually been in a vendor organization doing what you do there, versus being out and about in a beat having to dig up security stories?
Well, I guess it depends on the definition. I mean, the last time that I worked at, strictly, a media organization was at TechTarget, which, was in, I think, between 2006 and 2008 or 2009. And then that's when I went to Kaspersky, and we started ThreatPost there. So, that was sort of the first one of those brand journalism sites, especially in InfoSec. I think it was the first one. And that was a thing that was happening at the time in some other industries as well. But it was, Ryan and Ryan's idea. And, we started it together at Kaspersky. We had a lot of fun there. And I think it was really successful. We did a lot of things that people hadn't really thought of before in the InfoSec industry, and did a lot of podcasts and videos. There was not a lot of InfoSec podcasts back then, and so it was really like we were able to get a bunch of people to talk to us that they were like, wait, you want to sort of like a radio show? Like, what is this? We're like, yeah. You just get on this microphone and we're ask you dumb questions. And, so yeah, it's been, almost 17 years since I worked at like an actual media organization. But, as you mentioned, I came up through eWeek when I started there when it was still PC Week in 2000. So that's how long ago that was. And it was like an actual physical magazine that people got in a mailbox. So
Yeah, like it was on paper, everybody, and it was like color and glossy. It was like
Mhm.
really cool. Like you could actually flip through it. I know this is like for all the
It's true.
Gen Zers and millennials out there, it's like a shocker, but like it was actually really cool back in the day.
I should have grabbed.
You
I
had to
have
wait for
some
it to come
sitting
to your
around here.
house.
Yeah, it's
Sorry, what was
amazing,
it?
Glenn. It was like the things that actually came physically to your house. Yeah, it was
It's
actually
crazy. Yeah.
so the thing about threat posts is, and it was the pioneer in this space, and like Kaspersky being willing to fund that kind of a thing and not just have it be a PR arm of Kaspersky was really great and really novel, and it didn't feel like a PR arm. So it's weird because and for a while I never actually associated threat post, and this was probably not the intent of Kaspersky, but I never associated threat post with the organization for a long time because the journalism was journalism and it was independent and it was digging, like you did a lot of really great stuff with Ryan there. So I actually never really thought of it as this is a vendor thing. I think that's why I asked the question the way I did.
Yeah.
Did you ever, I mean, like, and if you can't say, that's fine, but did you ever have any pressure to try to steer it more towards vendory things or their stuff, or you're just a kind of free reign to just make awareness better for the cybersecurity community?
At the very, very beginning, we had a little bit of pressure internally from folks on like the marketing / sales side who didn't really understand what we were doing because, I mean, it was brand new. I can't blame them for not really understanding why, they were funding this journalism site. So there were people that would be like, why aren't you writing about our new products? Like at Kaspersky, like, why aren't you writing about this new version of AV or whatever it happened to be? And luckily, Ryan and I never really had to respond to those people. Our boss, who was the VP of marketing for North America at the time, who's, the one that sort of backed all of this, was like, listen, you go do your job and let them do what they do. Don't worry about what they're doing. You go sell some stuff. Let Ryan and Dennis do what they do. And so that was kind of the end of that. And also it had like Eugene Kaspersky loved it like right from the start, and it had his backing and sort of enthusiasm behind it, which went a long way at that point. So that really helped. And we also made the decision right at the beginning that we weren't going to write about products at all, which took the pressure off. Like, hey, listen, we're not writing about anybody else's products, so we're not going to write about Kaspersky's either. Like, we just sort of across the board, we didn't want to do that. So
it's amazing. It's great to hear, and I'm not surprised because like you guys did great work. So I'm not surprised to hear that like the founder also thought it was good work that you all did. Last week in the green room, like we were talking about like what I might ask, and I have to ask this question because I don't think anybody, not anybody, but I think the vast majority of cybersecurity professionals do not understand what a brutal day you have to go through because you have companies like mine, but we don't do this. So like it is so like we have vendors. I'm a vendor. We're a vendor. Actually, not a vendor. But we don't do horrible pitches 5 times a day to everybody to try to get our word out there. We're pretty targeted in what we do, and we try to be at meaty and useful. What was it like being the recipient of like I'm going to say a gazillion, but like how many pitches a day did you get? How cringeworthy were them? And what are some of the worst pitches you've ever had? And maybe you explain what the pitching thing is, because I think a lot of people don't know what that is.
yeah, so I mean, it would depend on where I was at the time, but even back in the eWeek days or the threat post days or just Cypher days, like the number of pitches we would get from PR folks, both internally at a vendor or at an agency, could be in the dozens a day or maybe up to 100, depending on like the time of year. Like if RSA is coming up, for example, like, starting around now, between now and RSA, literally dozens and dozens a day of like, hey, we're launching this at RSA, or, come meet our VP of sales at RSA, or some nonsense like that. That would just like take up all of your day if you let it. So luckily, like, I think the places that I've been, most people sort of got the idea that I was not going to write those kind of stories. Like, people sort of figured out like, okay, you're interested in the technical stuff, you're interested in like deep stories that are not just the surface headlines. So over the years that got a little better and better, but then as like newer people come into the industry, that they just start like they don't know that stuff and they start throwing this stuff at you. So it can just take up like tons and tons of your time. And granted, there are PR pros who I've known for 20 years who know what they're doing and understand like the various beats that certain reporters have and their interest in that kind of stuff. So if I get an email from one of those folks, I know like, okay, it's going to be something good. Like if I got an email from GreyNoise or a text from Andrew that was like, hey, we have this thing that's happening, you're going to be interested. Like I pay attention to that. Like there's certain folks like that, but a lot of it, like 98% of it is noise. There's so little signal, like as this industry has expanded over the last 25 years, that it really became so much more difficult to separate like the good stuff from the bad stuff. You know, it just like trying to think of the worst pitches that I've gotten is like literally impossible. Like I used to keep a file of that stuff. And like, as I told you guys last, like the reporters in this industry all know each other and we all trade those kind of things like back and forth whenever we see each other at like Black Hat or, you know, somewhere like that, just kind of laugh about that stuff. But, you know, it's everybody's trying to do their job. You know, the PR folks have a job to do, the marketing folks have a job to do. And our job is to kind of like deflect all that stuff and try and find the stories that actually matter to the defenders, you know, out there trying to do their jobs.
So what is a good pitch then, as far as, because it's so what I think what you're saying is so many organizations use pitches to journalists as marketing, basically an extension of marketing for their thing, whereas journalism should be generically more about the happenings and information sharing. So like what is a good pitch? What is a terrible pitch? Like what should folks think about if they're trying to get their actual news story out there?
Yeah, good pitch is something that's actually tailored to the interests of the specific reporter or the sort of, you know, not interest, but like the coverage area of the outlet itself. You know, you need to understand what they write about and what they don't write about. Instead of, you know, we all have these stories of getting you know, a blast email in our inbox that says, dear, you know, brackets, insert name here. Like get those all the time because they just forget to put the name in. Get 5 of those a week. So people need to do their homework. I think it's like any other kind of pitch. Like if you're going in to a sales meeting or you're going into a meeting with a VC trying to raise money or something, you have to understand who the audience is. Like if you're trying to come to us with like a product story at Decipher, no thanks, we're not interested. You know, we want something deeper, more below the surface, something that's going to help inform people and let them do their jobs better, not try and scare them. You know, we're not interested in FUD or trying to, you know, have the latest terrifying thing like take up 20 minutes of your day when it really doesn't affect you. Like, let's find what actually helps people do their jobs better and helps us all be a little safer.
What was the hardest story? And that it could be a good hard or like a terrible hard, but like what was the hardest story you've ever had to work on?
Oh man. I have probably the most recent example. I mean, it wasn't hard, it was super fun, but it took forever and ever, was
Cool.
the oral history I did of the Loft when we launched Decipher in like 2018, I think it was. I'd known the Loft guys for quite a while because I'm in the Boston area and there are a lot of those guys are from here. So I got to know them over the years. And when we were trying to figure out what kind of stories we wanted to tell at Decipher, I had this idea. I was like, what if we just did like a story on the Loft guys and like sort of the effect they've had on the industry and all that kind of stuff. And it wound up just being like this 4-part series that, you know, we did video with it. We did all this kind of stuff. We went to one of the hacker spaces here in Cambridge where some of those guys still hang out. And it probably took me like 6 months to like do all the interviews and actually write it and all that kind of stuff. It was super fun, but it was one of those, like, by the end, I was just like, Jesus Christ, I'm never doing that again. And then of course I did it again like 3 years later with like bug bounties, but it was stressful in a lot of ways because it's not my story, it's their story. I didn't want, and there's been some stresses and things in that group over the years, which happens. And I wanted to make sure that I got things right and wasn't misrepresenting the way that things happened, in 1996 or whatever. So I didn't want to, get one little detail wrong that made a huge difference in the story. And I never heard that I did. So hopefully it worked out. But yeah, that was one, like, when I can clearly remember this, the day that this first story went up, when we launched the site, I was at SAS in Cancun, I want to say it was. And like we had
Rough
launched,
life, really, really, really rough life
Yeah,
there,
it's
Dennis.
rough.
Sorry.
But like, I remember Katie Musuris was there at SAS, and she was part of that story too. And I remember having her like, she had seen what she was part of, but I remember having her read the story like over my shoulder on my laptop screen. I was like, oh my, like literally holding my breath for like 10 minutes if something was like wrong or inaccurate or something like that. I was like, God, please, 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 please. It was all fine, but it was just like, those are the things, like, as a journalist, you're always worried because people have a dim view of journalism anyway. And especially, I think, in the infosec industry over the years, like, there's been certain, like, there's a lot of sort of, backlash for people overhyping things or things like that. So you always want to try and be as considerate and conscientious about that stuff as you can.
Yeah, I dropped the link to the part one into the chat, and we'll make sure it gets in the show notes too for the younger folks that are listening, because I do know we have some of those. If you have not read this, it's like you need to. It's like 101. You shouldn't have a job if you don't read this first. And then secondly, for folks that aren't cyber, because there are some folks that listen to this that aren't cyber people because they're crazy and insane. This will give you an insight of how the industry got to where it is. These are like some of the seminal figures in it, like very, and Dennis did a fantastic job on the series, so you definitely need to go do that. Anybody else have anything you want to ask Dennis before I ask him one more question?
I kind of want to touch on, I know that we're hitting up on time, but like, this is a very generic question, but I think it'll go somewhere. But it's like, it's kind of assessing the media's role on the landscape of security in general, whether it's positive or negative, like overall. And kind of what I mean by that is, we have security is a very interesting field where sometimes to get the good thing or the right thing done, you have to do the less good thing, like release a POC or actually, I'm not saying that's bad or good. I'm just painting a picture. So then you need eyeballs to look at something, and then you need the story to be circulated. And then, so basically, like, a lot of ways that we drive change in this field is through journalism. But then also, with every field, there's also less good or less wholesome people. So, like, just kind of your thoughts on, the last 17 to 20 years of journalism and security, and kind of how it has positively or negatively impacted kind of like the actual threat landscape for organizations.
Well, I hope it's been positive overall, but I think anyone that's been writing about security for any amount of time has gotten the kind of backlash that you're describing, Glenn, where people will say, well, wait a second, why are you writing about this bug and giving people information about how to, attack this specific product? Like, what good does that do anybody? That sort of thing. And, it's like, I don't have time to explain that to everybody every time. That happened a lot very early on in like the security journalism world, when, like when I started, there were maybe 5 people covering security full time, at least here in the US. And some of those folks are still at it, but it's obviously exploded over the last 25 years. So now you have everybody, like, there's more stories, yes, and there's probably more bugs, yes, but there's also more people competing for eyeballs and attention. So they need 6 stories every day. You have to go and find whether they're real stories or really impactful stories or not, you need those stories every day to keep your site running, right? So I think there is a lot of sort of noise out there that isn't necessarily helping anyone. So I think the people that are really good at this, like, Andy Greenberg or Kim Zetter or folks like that really know what they're talking about and take the time to understand the subject matter and the people involved in the larger sort of landscape of the impact that the stories are going to have. Like, those are the people you want to pay attention to, right? Like, there's plenty of other sites out there that, just kind of like.
So you're saying that click rates or clicks aren't the best metric for a story?
Weirdly, no. Yeah, it's really hard to explain that to to people a lot of times, but yeah, I mean, we would see this sometimes anywhere I've been. You look at a story that you worked weeks and weeks on and look at the traffic it gets, and you're like, damn, why isn't that doing better? And then you look at some story you wrote in 15 minutes over lunch about some, PHP bug, and you're like, Jesus, this is annoying. But I think that's true probably in every field of journalism, not just tech. Like, that's just how it goes.
Yeah, it was clearly a biased comment there, but yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. So before we go on to the next topic, and we're gonna have you back on to ask you more questions if that's okay too.
Sure.
Do you have anything you want to just say to everybody about your time in journalism and your current time in journalism that you're doing now?
Gosh, I don't know. I wasn't really prepared for that, but I mean, journalism is all I ever wanted to do. Like, that's, I started a tiny little newspaper, and I thought that's what I was going to be for my entire career, was like a newspaper reporter. And I loved it. And then, just sort of like fell into tech journalism and security over the years, and couldn't imagine doing anything else. Honestly, I've loved every minute of it. It's, some of my closest friends in the world are people I've met through this job. So, I still love writing. I still love covering security. It's super fun. It's something different every day. It's always an adventure, as you guys know. So, yeah, it's been a very wild ride for the last 24 years. I can tell you that.
That is awesome. I really appreciate you taking, like, you didn't have to come on and you didn't have to open up, and I appreciate you doing both of those two things.
Oh yeah, come on. I'm having a great time.
All right, so we are going to blow past this one, which is Census did a great blog, because that's all they do are great blogs. I'm hoping we can get Emily back on soon, because Emily, I still have to have our battle, our Street Fighter battle about encryption. This was a great blog on the daft decision by the UK to ask every vendor to blow up encryption so they could spy on everybody. It's a good story. It covers all of that in a really concise way and really accessible way. So if you didn't want to read 500 other articles, this one does it really, really well. We're going to have Kimber come back on, going to be on today and cover this. Vonchek's Patrick did a good article on how they have a process for helping folks understand how to do vulnerability categorization and prioritization with stakeholders. I don't have time to go into it today. We're definitely going to take a deeper dive on it when Kimber comes back in, but it's definitely worth a read, because it explains their position on this. It's a really good position. Patrick does a good job. He's a great communicator, so you should definitely do that. Glenn, do we have anything quickly to say about the Think PHP own cloud flaws at scale? I mean, it's yet another Think PHP exploit, blah, 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 whatever. So.
Yeah, TLDR was that there was a spike. It's not at its maximum levels, but there was a spike in interest last week. So Noah put this together to kind of raise awareness for that. But it's not new, so I'll say that. So don't panic, but it is still very interesting and attractive to threat actors. So
yeah, think PHP is just, it's pervasive, because as you all just mentioned, no one's going to throw a PHP. So great, we're doing this again and forever. So that's awesome. On a brighter note, we have another. So along with Remy being at DistrictCon, Brianna is going to be on the Run Zero podcast, vlogcast, whatever we call these things.
One of our researchers.
I need to find. on the 19th. And Brianna's a Labs member, but she's also going to be on there. They have a great show. You definitely, if you don't sub to that one, sub to that one too. They're both companions. They work really well together. And Bree's gonna talk a lot about cool stuff because she's all about like the Internet of Things and operational technology and ICS stuff now. And it's gonna be a good conversation with them for that one. So that's
No
pretty
one
cool.
knows more random things like than she does. Like, just
especially about
unrelated
animals.
things.
Especially about animals.
I don't even, especially about anything. I don't even know. Just random facts all the time. It's great.
Cool. So before we sign off, any parting words of encouragement or discouragement to the audience?
You've already made it to Tuesday. Congratulations.
I mean, is that really an accomplishment anymore? Like, do you
all I
really
got.
want the next day to come?
That's all I got,
want
Bob.
the next day to come.
Okay. Nice.
Got to take whatever
All right,
wins
well-
you can get.
All right. Well, I do appreciate you all coming on today, taking time out of your day to do this. And that is all the time we have for today's show. So remember, folks, in the world of cybersecurity, procrastination is the enemy. Patch your systems faster than an attacker can scan for a vulnerability. Double check who's really on the other end of that remote connection, and never underestimate the power of good encryption because weakening it only strengthens the bad guys. Stay sharp, stay secure, and don't let today's headlines become tomorrow's breaches. So next time, firewall strong and your passwords stronger. Catch you next week, everybody.